There is no tartan to show, and I'm Scottish by adoption, which is why you're thinking, that's not a Scottish accent. Although people from the south of England have at times told me how much they've enjoyed my Scottish accent. Hoping that my slides are going to appear magically on the screen. Yeah, there we go. That's it. So thank you so much for having me again. It was a real pleasure last year to be here with you all, and I had an absolute ball yesterday in the workshop, helping people get to grips with different tricks and tips that they can use to enhance the visualizations that they're creating, and it was really fun seeing the before and afters of some of you in the group. So if you were there and you did that, then thank you so much. That was great. What I'm talking about today is a process for getting from a fairly convoluted set of steps to go from data to visualization, and creating something that essentially does it at the press of a button for one of the clients who doesn't code. So this is slightly different from what I normally do. I realized looking at this that this is the last slide. So let me navigate back to the top slide, and I think I win the prize from Pedro for having just edited something literally in the last 30 seconds. So we're going to be talking about leveraging Shiny as a tool for doing that. So getting from the data straight to visualizations through Shiny. For those that I've not met before, I'm Cara, and I'm a data visualization consultant. And what that means is that I spend my time helping organizations and research teams make the most out of data-to-viz. So that's by providing some training or by providing some toolkits that do a lot of the heavy lifting for them. And the way that I ended up here was through growing up with a love for patterns in music and language, and a fascination with the human brain. Music and language is just noise, but somehow we make sense of it. And sometimes it's beautiful and sometimes it's not. And why is that? That's something that I'd always found quite interesting. So I had the honor of taking that into a PhD, putting electrodes on people's heads and playing them all sorts of weird bits of music and language and seeing how the brains reacted. Looking at the parallels between the two, it was really fun. And then I needed to get a job. And a PhD looking at the psychology of music and language was not the stuff that was getting funded at the time. You can probably guess when I finished my PhD if I tell you that the main stuff that was going in was how to help people make wise financial decisions to avoid another financial crash, and the obesity epidemic. Those were the two things that were really getting funding. So music psychology, not so much. But what I did was I took all the research and all the statistics from that and took it into the world of postgraduate medical examinations. And that's where I got to learn to interact with surgeons, which was great. Surgeons don't really like talking data, and they really, really, really do not like not understanding stuff. And so I decided that I would explore how visualizations could help in those conversations so that they knew what they were looking at and they could make informed decisions going from there. So that's how I ended up doing this, and it's been fun, and I really enjoy doing this for different organizations now. The thing that drives me is helping other people maximize the impact of their expertise. And essentially, I get to make other people look good, which is the joy of the whole thing. So normally what I do is I'll start with some basic data, I'll build a fairly basic looking plot, and then we'll iterate on it, and I'll add some code, and I'll share the code with you so that you can go and do exactly the same thing, and we end up with something that looks quite polished. But this time around, I'm doing something different. So this is a project which started with a finished design, and then I had to work out how to recreate it in R. I then had to use the data viz consultant side of my brain to figure out the best way of summarizing and displaying the data. And I then had to come up with a plot generating solution for a client who doesn't code. So it's quite a different approach, but the whole aim of the game is still the same. It's getting from the data straight to a visualization in a way that is more straightforward for the client than it would have been had we done it otherwise. So to talk you through this, I'm going to introduce you to the client. So say hi to Gavin. This is Gavin. This is Gavin Russell. And Gavin and I interacted in a workshop in which I was providing some advice on businesses for using data to highlight the work that they do. And he saw the plots that I created. I'd mentioned that I'd made them straight for the data, and he decided we should have a conversation. So Gavin runs a company called Peppermoth, which is a coaching academy and a membership community that empowers leaders to master their organizational culture. And so he basically helps people figure out what's going on in the culture, where things might be falling down, where things are doing really well, so that they can reflect on that and make the culture even better for everybody that works there. But where does data-viz come into it? Data-viz comes in because the way that he does this is actually quite interesting. He runs a questionnaire that's a standard one, then he runs across all the employees in different sectors, collects data about where they're working, their preferred working styles, does all the analysis behind it, looks at different aspects of culture, looks at different facets of how people engage with that culture, and then he reports that back to the people and provides some coaching. And he's come up with what he calls the culture operating model, which is just the different ways of capturing different aspects of the culture that's going on there. And he did that based on the analysis of the data, and actually the labels have changed since then because with his research he's refined it a little bit further. But this was the starting point. And he had a bit of input on the graphic design front from Alison and Joshi to make the colours all work nicely. So that meant that I had some nice colours to start with rather than having to come up with all of that from scratch, which actually I quite enjoy doing. But it was nice to be able to build on her work. And then what Gavin was doing was he was opening up PowerPoint and he was drawing the outcomes of the analysis that he'd done. And this is a really painful process to do. And I know that because this isn't real data. I modified the data so I wasn't in risk of showing anything. And in the process of doing that, I had to drag all these little red lines to be in a different place. I had to make sure that the black lines behind them aligned. And he was really accurate in what he was doing, but it was taking him ages. And this wasn't something that was particularly scalable. And also there's maybe bits in the data that we could be showing that would give us a bit more nuance. So this was the nature of the task. Essentially, could you make that? So I thought, right, I like a good ggplot challenge. Let's see, could we recreate that with ggplot? And yeah, I thought let's give it a go. So I'm going to break it down a little bit so you can see what goes into it. We first got a bunch of rectangles that all have a different transparency to them. So we're going from 1 to 9. The scale goes from 1 to 10, but we need 9 rectangles to bridge the gaps. And we're creating those, which gives us this, and then we get a little band as well at the top where we can put we're going to put our labels. We're going to put a band at the bottom so that we can put the labels that are on the inside of the circle, if you remember what the circle looks like. And then we make it into a circle. And there we go. So obviously it skipped a few steps there in the process, but actually not so much, because this other questions here is the one that we're starting from here, and all we're doing is adding chord polar. So you can do some quite fun stuff with ggplot if you know what you're looking for. If you've seen someone do it before, so if you've seen this and think this is great, nick it. That's absolutely fine. Go and do this in your own context. And then we need to add some labels, and so I'm adding them using jump text path, which does a really nice job of rounding them. So the labels get kind of bent around the curve at the edge, and we have ourselves essentially a replica of the original model that he had. I've left the stuff out the middle, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But yeah, so the question was, can you make that? And I think the answer is, yeah, we can. So we've got a basis for creating this plot. Could you make the data story clearer? That's kind of what I'm here for. So I thought, okay, let's see what we can do. So you remember he had that model, and then he just put the dots on it and tied them together. And I introduced him to the concept of a bee swarm plot. And so you can see I've got the bee swarms within each of the segments. I'm a big fan of showing the raw data where you can, and we talked about that yesterday in the workshop. It just gives you more nuance. You get to see which set of questions here was a bit of a Marmite section. You know, if people were on the collective identity, some people think it's great and some people think it's really not great at all. If you just had the mean, you'd end up somewhere in the middle. You wouldn't really be able to interpret that particularly clearly. So showing the raw data is quite a useful thing. And also, when you're talking about data that has been gathered from people, these are all people who have opinions. And it's worth recognizing that. And I think sometimes showing the raw data, it just humanizes the data a little bit more than if you turn it all into summary statistics. But the summary is still quite useful. So we thought we would create the radar and recreate that on top. This was not straightforward to do. One of the things I had to figure out is what color to use. And initially I went for a quite vibrant purple. And then I realized that it looked familiar. It's because it looked like a Ninja Turtle. And that wasn't quite the vibe that we were going for. So I made it a little bit more transparent, but it's still kind of pulling on the opposite end of the colors so that it stands out against its background. But yeah, it was not straightforward. In the process of doing this, I ended up creating some accidental art, which was quite fun. And the reason why it's not straightforward is because you're trying to draw straight lines on curved coordinates. And so if you just do it the normal way, creating a polygon, what it does is it creates all sorts of wobbly lines that are all nice. It looks beautiful, but it's a mess. And you can't really do anything with it. And so, I created some accidental art in the process of trying to figure that out, decided, do I need to do trigonometry on absolutely everything else so that I can have some straight lines? Or is there a way to do this? And there is a way to do it. I've created my first geom. There we go. I'd always wanted to give that a go. Had never managed to find the time to do it. This was not the one that I thought I was going to do. But thank you, Gavin, for giving me the opportunity to try something new. So I'm not going to lie. Looking at this again in the cold light of day, I'm not entirely sure that I could talk you through what it's doing. But this was modified from an answer on Stack Overflow from somebody who had tried to do something similar. Worked it through, shared it with a few folks in the online RStats community, which is just a really great community to get some feedback on things. They helped me figure out how to get hold of this little point argument that is hidden deep in the innards of ggplot. And it works. We have ourselves a polygon that is straight, and I think the magic is happening in here somewhere. In terms of not following the polar coordinates, but just sticking with the normal ones. So the radar works fine, we've got that sorted, but we could still make it a little bit easier to interpret, and for that we tried various options, and what we settled with was having a visual anchor that shows that anything that's basically inside of that, the danger zone of being below the point on the rating scale where it's acceptable, you can see quite clearly that it's inside that zone. If you don't have that there, it's a little bit more wobbly and difficult to interpret what the data is. So again, something that you might want to reuse in your own context, having little visual anchors inside your plots can be really useful for doing that. The other fun challenge with this is that Gavin is slightly colorblind, and so we needed to work with colors that were going to work for him. And I always talk about creating color palettes that are accessible and that work for everyone. So it was really good actually testing that with somebody who could give me some real feedback on it. So there we go, we've got that sorted and we've made it clearer. And then the next question is, can we build in some options? What can we do from here? So we've got the graph, we've got it working. We don't want to create one. The whole point of this was that Gavin wanted to be able to take it and apply it across all the different clients that he's working with. I really like creating parameterized plots. It's something that I enjoy doing, and actually it's probably what got me into R in the first place when I was working with the surgeons and needing to analyze data from the exams over and again. It's different exams, different students, but you need to do the same thing with the data. And so creating plots that can read in different data sets is quite fun. But it wasn't until I was at an R user group. Oh, my battery's running low. I thought we were plugged in. Are we plugged in? No! That was a quick, sudden death, wasn't it? We'll be back. But yeah, it wasn't until I went to an R user group in Glasgow and I chatted to Mike Smith there that he told me about the little replace trick that you can do with a plot. So you can create a ggplot and then simply replace the data within it, and it does the trick. Oh, we're back. We are back. So apologies for that sudden and unexpected death of my laptop. That was really quick, wasn't it? And maybe need to look into replacing the battery element of it. So as I said, I love creating parameterized plot, but it wasn't until I had a chat with Mike that I learned this new trick. Here's our first plot, and it's just the penguins being fed into it. For demo, here's Mike. And the trick that he taught me was this little symbol, which is the replace symbol, which I had used before to replace things in a plot theme. But if you just take a plot, use the replace thing, and then change what data you're feeding into it, then you get a different plot coming out there at the other end. So there we go, magic. Magic, but also there's a few things that you need to do to make sure that this is safe. So you would need to make sure that your colors are nicely assigned using the named vectors that we talked about in the workshop yesterday. Otherwise, your colors are going to jump around depending on what data is in there, and you don't really want to do that. So creating parameterized plots is fun, and you can do more than just replace the data. You can do things like adding arguments. You're essentially just writing a function that feeds the data in and then also does some fun things. So for this one of the options was, do we want to look at the radar for the data as a whole? Or do we want to do it for one of the subsets of the questions, which is how widely shared that aspect of the culture feels across the organization? And so you can create your functions in such a way that you have a default. So here the default is that if I'm not specifying anything, it creates the radar overall. And then I can narrow it down to just be the radar to do with the widely shared questions. I enjoy creating parameterized plots so much that I actually played us out last time at our medicine to the tune of Staying Alive with the Bee Gees. If you can get that into your head, parameterized. You can find that on YouTube. Zoom completely destroyed my ukulele effort, but the YouTube recording worked fine. So if that's something you're interested in, go and have a look. I mentioned at the start that I didn't include the stuff about purpose and values in the middle of the plot because it was a bit busy and it wasn't actually adding any information for us to interpret. So instead, we worked on creating another plot that would capture the purpose and values side of what Gavin was collecting. And one of the joys of doing this for me was that when I decided to split it into the different subcategories, it looked like a moth. And I thought, great, his company is called Pepper Moth. This is really nice. We get to create a visual that is on brand and also reflects something of the name of what he does. So the next question obviously comes, can I make these myself? He doesn't want to have to send me stuff all the time so that I can do it for him. And so if you've done this before, your gut reaction is, sure, that's fine. Here's the script. I'll help you install R&R Studio. All you need to do is point it to the right file, and then everything should run just fine. And you try that with your client, and they go, what do you mean? Just point it at the file? There's lots of buttons that look like arrows. You're saying just click the arrow. Like, honestly, there are loads of them. And it's giving me an error about something called ggplot. What is that? And they end up going back to this thing and think, actually, I think I'll just go back to doing it in PowerPoint, which is the last thing that you want, right? You want to create a process that's fairly straightforward. And yeah, they're right. If you have a look at this, look at all the arrows. You say, click on the arrow. There's so many options that they could go with. So it's just a bit confusing. Those of us who know and love our studio know what we're looking at. But for people who've never seen it before, it's quite intimidating. And so we want to avoid this kind of scenario. And you think, okay, that's fine. I'll turn it into a Shiny app for you. And that way you can just click on Run App, and then it should take it from there. Okay, it's saying something. I can't find something called Shiny. And what file do I need to open again? And how come it opens this thing in a weird window? It's not a browser, but it's also, like, it's just not our studio. It's weird. And why does this text keep appearing when I click on stuff? I think I'll just go back to doing it in PowerPoint. And so you just don't want to end up with this kind of scenario. So the real question is, can I make these things myself without having to learn any R? And I had a bunch of conversations with people. That's Charlie Hadley in the middle there, and International Women of Mystery, Leslie Duff on the side. Had a chat with them about different Shiny hosting options, and I know there's people in the room who are doing some really clever stuff with that. But we had concerns about data security, then there's costs involved, there's maintenance issues, and it just felt like hosting online seemed like probably more effort than what this needed. So then I thought, it's okay, I'll package it up. I've done this before. You can put your Shiny app inside a package, and that means that when the client installs it, it gets all the dependencies, it hides the code away nicely so they don't get to see all the scary stuff that you've had to do to get that radar to work. And you can launch the app locally in the browser, and then in terms of maintenance, you just need to update the package, and they can reinstall it, and it should be fine. So the initial install will look something like that. Just install R. You don't even need RStudio, you just need R. Install the package, and get that from the remotes on GitHub with a top secret key that means that no one else can get hold of it. And then you can create a desktop shortcut with an icon that is tied to Gavin's organization, so it looks familiar to him. And when you click it, it opens up the app in a browser, and you can do that quite nicely. It's a tip I picked up from Milan Valasek when we were both working at the College of Surgeons to help our administrators have something that was easy for them to use. And then when we need to update it, we can just do it this way. Shall we give it a go, she says with fear and trepidation after the laptop just died. Let's see. So we have here the icon, and when we double click it, it launches into the browser. Yes, it works. Okay, very good. And Gavin wanted to not only collect the data and create the graphs, he also wants to store this in a database that he can interrogate. If you've had a look at my talks page recently, you'll see where the inspiration for these totally made-up companies have come from. But he could then go and select different organizations in it and say, okay, I just want to look at people who are working on a hybrid working model, for example, and generate the graphs. But what we're going to do here instead, just to show you how it works, we're not going to build the graphs because I haven't loaded the data in. There we go. We're going to load in the data, and let's go for Acorn Solutions, and we're going to build the graphs. And while it's doing that, if anyone has figured out what bit of CSS I need to change to make this button not be blue, I will buy you a drink after the conference, so come and chat to me. So what we've got here is an app that creates the plots that he needs, and also gives him the options for manipulating them. And what he can do from there is right-click and save the image if he wants to. It also creates a summary data. But more interestingly, you can export the graphs, and then you've got them all sorted here, and he can go and use them. So essentially, it does what we wanted it to do, which is take in the data, create some visualizations, and spit them out in a way that's easy for him to continue using from there. So let me exit the full screen of the app and just wrap up. So we gave it a go the lifetime it worked, despite my computer deciding that now is a great time to do some Windows updates. Why does it work for him? It works for him because he uses different data, but with an identical format every time. So he gets the data straight from the questionnaire, the online questionnaire that he's using. And actually, it's best to not even open it up, because otherwise, if you open it in Excel and it sees something like 1 to 50, it decides that must mean January 1950, right? And turns it into a date. So just get the data straight from the questionnaire website and feed it straight in. It turns complex things into something that his clients can make sense of. It looks professional for him, without being a huge effort for him to invest in creating them. And it frees up time that he can end up spending discussing the outcomes with his clients. So my question to you is, where could you build something like this and be a bit of a superhero for the team that's currently working very hard at recreating things manually? And who do you know who could use something like this? And because this kind of stuff happens by word of mouth, feel free to send them my way. That would be wonderful. Learning this kind of stuff happens in community, and I've done my best to mention and thank people as I've gone along all of this. But just a quick reminder, we've got Gavin and Alison for the original design. Charlie and Leslie helped me talk through Shiny. The desktop shortcut was developed at the College of Surgeons by Milan, and it was really fun having the administrators as initial testers for that. And then the ggplot solutions, thanks to the lovely RStats community, and Tone Brand, whoever you are on Stack Overflow. I'm grateful for your input. But that's it from me. I'll hand back over to Colin and take some questions if you have some.